The champagne flute slipped from Eleanor's fingers, crystals shattering against the limestone terrace as she stared at her phone screen. 3 months of planning, $62,000 wired, promises of exploring ancient temples in Cambodia together. But the email from Singapore Airlines burned through her vision like acid. Passenger manifest. For flight SQ-291, Marcus Caldwell, Diana Caldwell, Emma Caldwell, Lucas Caldwell. 4 names. 4 tickets. Her name, nowhere to be found. Eleanor Blackwood had survived corporate takeovers, hostile board meetings, and the death of her husband Richard 8 years ago. She'd raised Marcus alone while building a pharmaceutical empire worth $500 million. Every sacrifice, every 16-hour day, every missed social event had been for him, for family, for the son who now stood in her circular driveway loading luggage into his Tesla with practiced efficiency, pretending she didn't exist. The morning fog rolled across the Marin County hills as Eleanor watched from her bedroom window. Diana helped the children into the car while Marcus checked his watch. They planned to meet at the airport, he said. Separate cars made more sense, he had insisted. Eleanor's Bentley was already loaded with her carefully packed suitcases, each item selected for the mother-son adventure she'd dreamed about for months. The temples of Angkor Wat, the beaches of Koh Rong, the night markets of Phnom Penh, all waiting for a family that had already left her behind. Her hands trembled as she dialed Marcus's number. It rang once before going to voicemail. She tried again. This time it didn't ring at all. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her own son had blocked her number while sitting in her driveway, preparing to steal away with her money toward a vacation she'd never take. Eleanor pressed her palm against the cold window, watching his Tesla disappear around the bend. 37 years of motherhood, and it had come to this. The drive to San Francisco International Airport took 53 minutes. She knew because she counted every one, her mind cycling through possibilities. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Marcus had booked her ticket separately. Maybe the email was wrong. Hope was a cruel companion, whispering lies that her heart wanted desperately to believe. But her gut knew better. The past few months suddenly made sense. Marcus's insistence on handling all the bookings, his questions about her will during casual dinners, Diana's sudden interest in her investment portfolio. At the airport, reality crashed down with brutal efficiency. The Singapore Airlines agent confirmed what Eleanor already knew. 4 tickets, purchased 8 weeks ago, paid with the money she had transferred to Marcus for their family bonding trip. The agent's sympathetic expression made it worse somehow, this stranger's pity for a woman abandoned by her own blood. Eleanor stood at the counter for 12 minutes, unable to move, unable to process the calculated cruelty of it all. Through the security checkpoint windows, she spotted them. Marcus's distinctive navy blazer moving through the priority line, Diana laughing at something on her phone, the children bouncing with excitement about their adventure. They looked like the perfect family, complete without her. Eleanor pressed her hand against the glass, willing Marcus to turn around, to see her, to remember who had given him life. But he never looked back. None of them did. Subscribe now if you understand the agony of family betrayal, or scroll past and pray you never feel the sting of being abandoned by those you love most. But remember, ignoring the warning signs doesn't make them disappear. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, finally. "Mom, I know this is hard, but Diana and I need this time as a nuclear family. The money you gave us will help us reconnect without distractions. Please understand, we'll talk when we return." Eleanor read it 17 times, each word a fresh wound. Without distractions. As if she were nothing more than background noise in his life. As if 37 years of unconditional love could be dismissed with a text message. The premium lounge rejected her entry. Of course it did. She wasn't flying anywhere. Eleanor found herself in a hard plastic chair near Gate 84, watching planes take off toward destinations she'd never see. An elderly couple nearby discussed their excitement about visiting grandchildren. A mother hushed her crying infant. Normal families living normal lives while Eleanor's world crumbled in Terminal B. She tried booking another flight. Everything was full. A tech conference in Singapore had consumed every business class seat for the next 4 days. Even if she could get there, what would she do? Beg her son to include her in the family he deliberately excluded her from? The humiliation would be unbearable. No, Marcus had won this round. But Eleanor Blackwood hadn't built an empire by accepting defeat. She'd learned long ago that the best revenge was served with precision, not passion. The drive home stretched into a blur of California highways and bitter revelations. Every memory felt tainted now. Last Christmas, when Marcus had given her that photo album of family memories, had he already been planning this betrayal? The Mother's Day brunch where Diana had tearfully thanked her for being like a real mother to her, was that performance art? Even the grandchildren's artwork on her refrigerator seemed to mock her now, innocent creations used as props in their parents' con game.
The wine cellar held 20,000 bottles, but Eleanor reached for the cheap Merlot she'd drunk with Richard on their first date. Sentiment was a luxury she could no longer afford, but tonight she'd allow herself this one weakness. Tomorrow, she would begin the transformation from victim to architect of justice. Tonight, she would mourn the son she'd lost long before that airport goodbye. Her phone remained silent except for notifications from Marcus's Instagram, photos from the airport lounge, Diana raising a champagne glass, the children playing on their iPads. Each post carefully crafted to show a happy family vacation with no mention of the missing matriarch who'd funded it all. Eleanor noticed the hashtags, family time, blessed life, making memories. The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. They weren't just excluding her, they were erasing her entirely. By midnight, Eleanor had made 2 decisions that would change everything. First, she would let them enjoy Cambodia, let them post their photos, spend her money, believe they'd won. Second, she would use that time to dismantle their lives with the same methodical planning they'd used to dismantle hers. Eleanor Blackwood had survived hostile takeovers before. This one would be no different, except the hostile shared her DNA. The first call went to Harrison Steele, the most feared attorney in Northern California. He answered on the second ring despite the late hour, his voice sharp with interest when she explained the situation. By dawn, he'd assembled a team of forensic accountants, private investigators, and estate planning specialists. If Marcus wanted to play games with family loyalty, Eleanor would show him what happened when you betrayed someone with unlimited resources and nothing left to lose. The investigation's initial findings arrived within 48 hours. Marcus hadn't just stolen $62,000. He'd been embezzling from her for years through shell companies, forged signatures, and manipulated trust documents. The vacation theft was merely the latest in a pattern of financial abuse that totaled nearly $4 million. Diana's family was involved too, her brother working at the bank that had facilitated several suspicious transfers. Eleanor felt something die inside her as she reviewed the evidence. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a desperate grab for money. This was systematic betrayal by someone she'd loved more than life itself. Every birthday check, every Christmas gift, every proud mother moment had been a transaction to them. She'd been nothing more than an ATM with maternal programming, and now that they'd figured out the PIN, she was disposable. If you're watching this without subscribing, you're just like Marcus, taking without giving, consuming without contributing. Hit subscribe now or admit in the comments that you see nothing wrong with bleeding people dry. Your silence speaks volumes about your character. The forensic accountants uncovered more horrors. A life insurance policy on Eleanor with Marcus as beneficiary, taken out just 6 months ago. searches on his computer for signs of dementia in elderly parents, and how to have someone declared mentally incompetent. They hadn't just planned to abandon her. They'd been preparing for her eventual disposal, legally and perhaps literally. The thought sent ice through her veins. Harrison suggested immediate legal action, but Eleanor had something more elegant in mind. She would let them enjoy Cambodia, let them post their photos, spend her money, believe they'd won. But first, she needed to protect herself. New locks on the estate, security cameras in every room, and a rotation of bodyguards who looked like gardeners and maintenance workers. The Blackwood Foundation came to life with stunning speed. Eleanor liquidated assets worth $200 million in the first week alone. The vacation homes in Tahoe and Scottsdale, the yacht Marcus had always coveted, the art collection Diana had openly admired, all converted to cash and funneled into irrevocable charitable trusts. Every dollar Marcus thought he'd inherit would instead go to supporting elderly victims of family financial abuse. She named the foundation's first initiative after Richard, the Richard Blackwood Center for Exploited Elders. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. While Marcus played in Cambodian temples, Eleanor built a temple to justice that would stand long after they were all gone. The local news picked up the story of her generous donation, praising her philanthropy. If only they knew the rage that fueled her generosity. Private investigators sent daily updates from Cambodia. Photos of Marcus and Diana at five-star resorts, spending lavishly on experiences Eleanor had dreamed of sharing. They'd hired a private guide for the Angkor Wat sunrise, the same guide Eleanor had corresponded with for months, planning the perfect mother-son moment. The betrayal felt fresh with every image, every receipt, every documentation of their theft-funded paradise. But the investigators found something else, something that changed Eleanor's entire strategy. Marcus was meeting with international banking representatives, setting up offshore accounts, preparing to hide assets from a divorce he'd been planning for months. Diana didn't know. She was posting happy family photos while her husband built financial escape routes with Eleanor's stolen money. The layers of deception were staggering. Everyone was betraying everyone, and Eleanor held all the evidence.
The call came at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks into their Cambodia trip. Emma, her 14-year-old granddaughter, whispering through tears. "Grandma Eleanor, something's wrong. Mom and Dad keep fighting. Dad says we can't come home. He says there are FBI agents at the house. What's happening?" The girl's terror cut through Eleanor's carefully constructed armor. Emma and Lucas were innocent casualties in their parents' war, but Eleanor couldn't afford weakness now. "Where are you calling from, sweetheart?" Eleanor kept her voice steady, maternal instincts battling with hard-won caution. Emma was in the hotel bathroom, scared to let her parents know she'd reached out. She had found Eleanor's number in her mother's blocked contacts and decided to risk the call. Smart girl. She'd inherited Eleanor's intelligence, if not her parents' morality. Eleanor made a calculated decision. "Emma, I need you to listen very carefully. Go back to bed. Act like nothing's wrong. In the morning, tell your parents you want to visit the National Museum. When you're there, go to the bathroom and call this number." She gave Emma the digits for a burner phone, knowing she was crossing a line, but unable to abandon her grandchildren the way she'd been abandoned. The next 36 hours tested every ounce of Eleanor's resolve. She coordinated with contacts in Phnom Penh, arranging safe passage for the children if needed. The FBI investigation Harrison had triggered was moving faster than expected. Marcus's offshore accounts had been frozen, his return tickets canceled by credit card companies investigating fraud. He was trapped in Cambodia with a wife who didn't know about his divorce plans and children who were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Emma called from the museum as instructed. Eleanor could hear Lucas in the background, his 7-year-old voice confused and frightened. "Grandma, Dad keeps saying you're trying to destroy our family. But you didn't do anything wrong, did you? You just wanted to come on vacation with us." The innocence in her granddaughter's voice nearly broke Eleanor's resolve. These children would carry scars from their parents' choices forever. Sometimes people make choices that hurt others very badly. Your parents made choices that hurt me very badly. Now they're facing consequences. But none of this is your fault, and I will always love you. It was the truth wrapped in gentleness, more kindness than Marcus deserved, but necessary for the children's sake. Emma promised to call again if things got worse, and Eleanor prayed they wouldn't need the extraction team she'd put on standby. Still watching without subscribing? You're witnessing a grandmother's heart breaking in real time, and you can't even click a button? Subscribe now, or explain in the comments why you think family betrayal is entertainment without responsibility. The news broke internationally within days. Pharmaceutical heiress's son arrested in Cambodia for financial crimes. The headlines were brutal, the details worse. Marcus's mugshot showed a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 days. Diana's tears at the airport made front-page news. The children were placed in temporary custody of embassy officials, while their parents navigated a legal system that didn't favor wealthy Americans who'd laundered money through their banks. Eleanor watched it all from her war room, the home office converted into a command center of screens and secure phones. She felt no satisfaction, only a hollow ache where maternal love used to live. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. Every document filed, every asset frozen, every legal motion was simply consequence catching up to actions. Marcus had taught her that family meant nothing. She was simply applying his lesson. Harrison called with updates hourly. The government had seized Marcus's assets under money laundering statutes. Diana's family was under investigation for their role in the banking fraud. Even the children's college funds, illegally established with stolen money, were frozen pending investigation. The financial empire Marcus had built on Eleanor's foundation was crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. But the masterstroke was yet to come. Eleanor had discovered something in Richard's old files, documents she'd never thought to examine before. Marcus wasn't Richard's biological son. Eleanor had known, had agreed to raise him as her own when she married Richard, but Marcus didn't know. His entire identity, his sense of entitlement to the Blackwood fortune, was built on a lie Eleanor had maintained out of love. Now that love was gone, and truth became her sharpest weapon. She prepared the revelation carefully, working with Harrison to ensure it was delivered at the moment of maximum impact, not out of cruelty, but as a final lesson in the cost of betrayal. Marcus had abandoned her at an airport, stolen her money, planned her legal destruction. He would learn that when you destroy someone's illusions about family, you risk having your own illusions destroyed in return. The Blackwood Foundation's first gala was scheduled for the night Marcus would be formally charged. Eleanor chose her dress carefully, Richard's favorite color, the sapphire necklace Marcus had always said would be his daughter's someday. She would stand before San Francisco's elite and announce donations totaling $300 million, every penny that would have been Marcus's inheritance. The photos would run in every paper, the contrast to his mugshot impossible to ignore.
Diana's family cracked first. Faced with federal charges and the collapse of their own financial schemes, they turned on Marcus with stunning speed. Her brother provided investigators with recordings of Marcus planning Eleanor's financial destruction, discussions about accelerating inheritance that danced dangerously close to conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was damning. Each revelation another nail in the coffin of Marcus's defense. Eleanor received the recordings at dawn, Harrison's voice grim as he explained their implications. She listened to her son discussing her death like a business transaction, calculating how long she might live, what diseases might claim her, whether they could speed the process without suspicion. The words hit her like physical blows, each sentence proof that the child she'd loved had become a monster capable of matricide. But between the horror came unexpected salvation. Lucas's small voice on one recording, asking why they couldn't just invite Grandma on the trip. Because Grandma's not really family, Marcus had replied.
She just has something we need. The casual cruelty of teaching a 7-year-old that love was transactional made Eleanor's decision easier. These children needed to be saved from their parents before they were corrupted beyond redemption. She worked with Child Services and the State Department to arrange temporary guardianship. It was complicated by the international nature of the situation, but Eleanor's resources and connections made the impossible merely difficult. Within a week, she had legal authority to bring Emma and Lucas home while their parents faced trial in Cambodia. The children were traumatized, confused, but alive and safe. Their return to San Francisco was bittersweet. Emma clung to Eleanor at the airport, the same airport where this nightmare had begun. Lucas held his sister's hand, too young to fully understand why his parents weren't coming home. Eleanor had prepared the East Wing of the estate for them, hired therapists who specialized in family trauma, arranged for tutors to help them catch up on missed school. She would give them what she'd tried to give Marcus: love without conditions, support without manipulation. The media circus was unavoidable. Billionaire grandmother rescues grandchildren from criminal parents made headlines across the country. Eleanor shielded the children as much as possible, but they saw the news, heard the whispers at their new school, felt the weight of their parents' sins. Emma struggled most, old enough to understand the full scope of the betrayal, young enough to still love the parents who'd used her as a prop in their schemes. "Why did they do it, Grandma?" Emma asked one evening, curled up in the library where Marcus used to do his homework. "We had everything. You gave us everything. Why wasn't it enough?" Eleanor didn't have easy answers. How could she explain that sometimes love becomes entitlement, that generosity can breed greed, that the child you raise can become a stranger capable of planning your death? "Sometimes people lose their way," Eleanor said finally. "They forget that family is about more than money. Your parents forgot that, but you don't have to make their mistakes." It was the kindest truth she could offer, a life lesson wrapped in hope that Emma and Lucas might break the cycle their parents had started. If you've made it this far without subscribing, you're watching children suffer from their parents' greed without even offering the support of joining our community. Subscribe now or admit you're just here for the drama without the empathy. These kids deserve better, and so do you. The trial began 3 months later, broadcast internationally due to the sensational nature of the crimes. Eleanor testified via video link, her voice steady as she detailed years of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and ultimate abandonment. She presented evidence with clinical detachment, every receipt, every forged document, every secret recording. The prosecutor called her the perfect witness, composed, credible, and utterly devastating to the defense. Marcus's attorney tried to paint Eleanor as a controlling mother who used money to manipulate her family. The strategy backfired spectacularly when Eleanor's lawyers presented Marcus's own words, his detailed plans to have her declared incompetent, his discussions about her life expectancy. The jury saw not a controlling mother, but a woman who'd given everything to a son who viewed her as an obstacle to wealth. Diana broke on the stand, sobbing as she admitted to knowing about the theft but claimed she thought it was justified. "She was so rich, she had so much, we just wanted our fair share." The entitlement was breathtaking. Eleanor's fair share had been a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and smart decisions. Their fair share was what they earned, not what they stole. The jury saw it the same way. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, money laundering. The list read like a catalog of betrayal. Marcus would spend the next 25 years in a Cambodian prison. Diana got 15 years. Their co-conspirators received various sentences, the entire network of greed collapsing under the weight of justice. Eleanor felt no joy, only a hollow satisfaction that actions finally met consequences. But the real victory came in the quiet moments with Emma and Lucas. Teaching Lucas to ride a bike in the same driveway where Marcus had learned to ride one, helping Emma with her science project, watching her brilliant mind tackle problems without the shadow of her parents' manipulation. These children were Eleanor's second chance. an opportunity to raise family members who understood that love wasn't measured in dollars, but in presence, support, and unconditional acceptance. The Blackwood Foundation flourished, funding programs across the country for elderly victims of family financial abuse. Eleanor spoke at conferences, sharing her story to help others recognize the warning signs she'd missed. The foundation's hotline received hundreds of calls monthly from seniors facing similar betrayals. Each story broke Eleanor's heart anew, but also strengthened her resolve to turn her pain into purpose.
1 year after the airport abandonment, Eleanor stood in the same terminal, but this time with different companions. Emma and Lucas flanked her, excited about their trip to see the Northern Lights in Iceland. It was a modest vacation compared to the elaborate Cambodia plans, but it was honest. Purchased with Eleanor's money, planned together, with 3 tickets for 3 travelers. No lies, no manipulation, no abandonment. "Grandma, are you okay?" Emma noticed Eleanor's pause at the security checkpoint, the same spot where she'd watched Marcus disappear. Eleanor squeezed her granddaughter's hand, feeling the warmth of genuine connection. "I'm perfect, sweetheart, just remembering something that doesn't matter anymore." And it was true. The pain had scarred over, leaving marks, but no longer bleeding. The Foundation's second year brought unexpected connections. Other betrayed parents reached out, sharing their stories, finding comfort in community. Eleanor organized support groups, funded legal aid for those who couldn't afford Harrison's fees, created scholarships for grandchildren abandoned by the financial crimes of their parents. Every dollar that might have enabled Marcus's greed now enabled healing for others. Harrison called with updates from Cambodia occasionally. Marcus had aged rapidly in prison, his designer physique withering in harsh conditions. He'd written letters begging for Eleanor's intervention, alternating between apologies and accusations. She read none of them, forwarding them unopened to a therapist who used them as case studies in narcissistic personality disorder. Marcus had made his choices. Now he lived with them, just as Eleanor lived with hers. Diana's family attempted reconciliation once, approaching Eleanor at a charity event. Her brother, out on bail pending appeal, cornered Eleanor near the silent auction tables. "You destroyed our lives. Over what? Money? You have more than you could ever spend." Eleanor's security intervened before she could respond. But she wouldn't have wasted words anyway. They still didn't understand. It had never been about money. It had been about trust, love, and the sacred bond between parent and child that they'd shattered for profit. The children thrived despite their traumatic start. Emma excelled in school, her natural intelligence flourishing without her parents' toxic influence. She talked about becoming a lawyer, inspired by Harrison's pursuit of justice. Lucas discovered a love for music, his piano lessons filling the estate with melodies that chased away old ghosts. Neither child spoke of their parents often, but when they did, Eleanor listened without judgment, letting them process their complicated emotions. Subscribe if you believe in justice and second chances. Skip if you think children should suffer for their parents' sins. But know that your choice reflects who you are when no one's watching. These kids are watching. What example will you set? The Foundation's work expanded internationally, partnering with organizations in Cambodia to help other elderly victims of family fraud. Eleanor found dark irony in funding programs in the country where Marcus was imprisoned, but justice had a circular quality. Every senior citizen protected from exploitation was a small victory against the mindset that had created Marcus's moral failure. Private investigators reported that Marcus had found religion in prison, leading Bible studies and counseling other inmates. Eleanor felt nothing at the news. Jailhouse conversions were common, especially among those facing decades of confinement. Whether his transformation was genuine or calculated no longer mattered. He'd lost the right to her emotional investment the moment he'd blocked her number at the airport. Emma asked about him sometimes, late at night when the big questions felt safer. "Do you think Dad ever loved us?
Or were we just tools to him? Eleanor chose her words carefully, knowing they would echo through Emma's life. I think he loved you the only way he knew how. But sometimes people's love gets sick, twisted by greed or fear or entitlement. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it might help you understand that his failures weren't your fault. The estate felt different now, filled with children's laughter instead of echoing emptiness. Eleanor converted Marcus's old room into a library, donating his trophies and memorabilia to charity. She kept one photo, him at 5 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, before money had meaning and love was simple. It reminded her that monsters weren't born, but made, often by the very people who loved them most. Lucas's 8th birthday approached, and Eleanor planned carefully. Not the extravagant affairs she'd thrown for Marcus, complete with ponies and magicians and 100 guest lists. Instead, a simple party with his new friends, a homemade cake, and presents chosen for joy rather than price tags. She was learning that real love lived in small moments, not grand gestures that could be monetized and exploited.
The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the estate's main gate despite all security measures. Eleanor recognized Marcus's handwriting immediately, though it had deteriorated into something desperate and jagged. The Cambodia postmark told her he'd found someone to smuggle it out, probably at great cost. She held it unopened for 3 days, debating whether to read it or add it to the unopened pile. Curiosity won. The letter was 12 pages of cramped writing, alternating between self-pity and recrimination. Marcus blamed everyone: Diana for pushing him, her family for enabling him, society for making wealth seem like the only measure of success. But mostly, he blamed Eleanor for being too generous, creating expectations, for being too controlling, making him desperate for freedom, for being too trusting, making the betrayal too easy. The mental gymnastics were impressive. In Marcus's version of events, he was the victim of Eleanor's success, forced into crime by the pressure of living up to the Blackwood name. He'd abandoned her at the airport for her own good, to free her from the burden of his presence. The theft was really an advance on his inheritance, which she'd always promised him anyway. Every crime became a kindness in his twisted narrative. But buried in the delusion were moments of raw truth. He admitted to planning her death, though he claimed it was only theoretical, a thought experiment born of desperation. He confessed to feeling nothing when he walked past her at the airport, her pain invisible against his anticipation of freedom. He acknowledged that Emma and Lucas were props in his performance of family, useful for maintaining Eleanor's generosity, but never truly loved. Eleanor burned the letter in the fireplace, watching his words turn to ash. She felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, no satisfaction. Marcus had become a stranger, whose opinions held no weight in her world. The boy she'd loved had died at that airport, and this prisoner was just someone wearing his face, writing his name, claiming his history without understanding his crimes. Emma found her there, staring at the dying embers. "Was it from him?" she asked, not needing to specify who him was. Eleanor nodded, pulling her granddaughter close. "He's still trying to rewrite history, make himself the hero of a story where he was the villain. But we know the truth, don't we?" Emma nodded, wise beyond her years. "He made his choices. We're making different ones." If you're still watching without subscribing, you're no different than Marcus, taking someone's pain and giving nothing back. Subscribe now, or live with the knowledge that you consume others' suffering for entertainment without even the courtesy of clicking a button. Your character is showing. The Foundation's 3rd anniversary gala was Eleanor's triumph. Hundreds of supporters gathered to celebrate the millions raised, the thousands helped, the lives transformed by turning betrayal into benevolence. Eleanor spoke eloquently about the power of choosing purpose over pain. of building something beautiful from broken trust. She never mentioned Marcus by name, but everyone knew her story. She'd become an icon of resilience in the face of family betrayal. Harrison approached her during the cocktail hour with news that shifted everything. Diana's been granted early release, good behavior, cooperation with authorities, and some legal maneuvering by her family's remaining assets. Eleanor felt the old wound throb, but didn't bleed. What about the children? Will she seek custody? Harrison shook his head. She signed away parental rights in exchange for the early release. She's moving to Costa Rica, starting fresh. Another abandonment. Another choice that prioritized self over children. Eleanor looked across the room where Emma chatted with foundation donors, poised and articulate at 15. Lucas performed a piano piece he'd composed, his small fingers confident on the keys. These children had survived their parents' betrayal and emerged stronger, kinder, more aware of the world's sharp edges, but not broken by them. Diana sent one message through her lawyer, asking to see the children before leaving the country. Eleanor left the choice to Emma and Lucas, believing they deserved agency in their own story. Emma declined immediately. She made her choice at the airport. I made mine in this house. Lucas, younger and still hopeful, wanted to say goodbye. Eleanor arranged a supervised visit, her heart breaking as she watched him search Diana's face for the mother he remembered. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. Diana cried, made promises about staying in touch, offered explanations that sounded hollow even to Lucas's young ears. When she left, he turned to Eleanor with tears streaming. She didn't even ask about my piano recital. She didn't know I played piano. Eleanor held him as he sobbed, another casualty of adults who mistook children for accessories. That night, Eleanor updated her will again. Not out of fear or manipulation, but from love and pragmatism. Emma and Lucas would inherit enough to build their own lives, but not enough to corrupt them. The bulk would continue funding the foundation, creating a legacy of healing that would outlast them all. She included letters for the children to read at different life stages: graduation, marriage, parenthood, sharing wisdom earned through pain.
5 years had passed since the airport abandonment when Eleanor received unexpected news. Marcus was dead. A prison fight. The details murky, but the result final. He'd been 42 years old, the same age Richard had been when Eleanor had fallen in love with him. The symmetry felt cosmic, cruel, and somehow fitting. The son who'd planned her death had met his own in a concrete cell thousands of miles from home. Eleanor felt nothing, then everything, then nothing again. Grief was complicated when it mourned someone who died long before their body stopped breathing. She didn't cry for the man in the Cambodian prison, but for the boy who'd once made her Mother's Day cards in crayon, who'd called her his hero at high school graduation, who'd held her hand at Richard's funeral, promising to take care of her forever. Emma and Lucas processed the news differently. Emma, now 20 and studying pre-law at Berkeley, responded with characteristic pragmatism. He was dead to us already. This just makes it official. But Eleanor saw her crying later, mourning the father he could have been, rather than the criminal he'd become. Lucas, 15 and sensitive, struggled more openly. "Does this make us orphans?" he asked, and Eleanor's heart shattered at the question. "You have me," she said firmly. "You've always had me, and you always will. Biology doesn't make family. Choice does. And I choose you, every day, forever." It was a promise she'd made before, but it carried new weight with Marcus gone. She was no longer their guardian, but their only family, the sole adult who'd chosen them over money, over convenience, over self. The foundation marked Marcus's death in its own way. Eleanor established a new program, rehabilitation services for inmates' children, helping them break cycles of crime and abandonment.
She never named it after Marcus, but those who knew the story understood. Every child helped was a small redemption for the children Marcus had failed, including his own. Diana sent a card from Costa Rica, her condolences as shallow as her commitment had been. She didn't attend any memorial, didn't ask about arrangements, didn't acknowledge her role in his downfall. Eleanor threw the card away unopened, recognizing the handwriting and feeling no obligation to engage with someone who'd abandoned her children twice. Still here without subscribing? You've watched a family die and rebuild, witnessed justice and redemption, and you can't even support the channel sharing these truths? Subscribe now or admit you're just another taker in a world full of givers. The choice defines you. Eleanor organized a private memorial, not for Marcus, but for the family that might have been. She, Emma, and Lucas scattered ashes in the Pacific, not Marcus's, which remained in Cambodia, but symbolic ashes, representing their grief, their anger, their path forward. They each spoke, not eulogies, but declarations of intention. Emma vowed to use law to protect the vulnerable. Lucas promised to create beauty in a world that could be ugly. Eleanor pledged to keep building bridges for those betrayed by blood. The media tried to resurrect the story, painting Marcus either villain or victim depending on their angle. Eleanor refused all interviews, protecting the children from renewed scrutiny. Their lives were not content for consumption, their pain not entertainment for the masses. She learned to build walls where necessary, keeping the world out while nurturing growth within. Harrison retired that year, his final act ensuring every legal protection remained ironclad. His replacement, a young woman named Sarah Chen, brought fresh energy to the Foundation's legal team. She'd been abandoned by family over her sexuality, understanding personally how blood could betray. Together, they expanded the Foundation's reach to include LGBTQ+ youth rejected by relatives, another form of family abandonment that left scars. Emma's graduation approached, and Eleanor planned carefully. Not the elaborate celebration she'd thrown for Marcus, but something meaningful. Emma had earned her achievements through merit, not manipulation. She'd chosen a career in justice, not for money, but for purpose. The party would reflect those values, intimate, genuine, focused on the future rather than mourning the past. Lucas surprised everyone by announcing he'd been accepted to Juilliard for piano performance. His audition piece had been a composition titled Airport Elegy, transforming their family's worst day into something hauntingly beautiful. Eleanor wept when she heard it, recognizing her own pain transformed into art. He was choosing to make music from misery, beauty from betrayal. The estate felt different now, lighter despite its history. Eleanor had redecorated gradually, removing traces of Marcus while preserving memories of Richard and creating new ones with the grandchildren. The walls held Emma's academic awards and Lucas's concert programs instead of Marcus's hollow achievements. Family photos showed 3 generations choosing each other daily, not bound by blood, by something stronger.
10 years after the airport abandonment, Eleanor stood in the same terminal again, but everything had changed. Emma, now a successful prosecutor specializing in elder abuse cases, walked beside her. Lucas, fresh from his debut at Carnegie Hall, carried his violin case with the same care Eleanor had once carried baby Marcus. They were flying to Switzerland, where Eleanor would receive an International Humanitarian Award for the Blackwood Foundation's work. The security line moved slowly, giving Eleanor time to reflect. A decade ago, she'd stood in the spot watching her son disappear with her money and her trust. Now she stood with grandchildren who'd chosen love over greed, purpose over profit. The scar remained, it always would, but it had become part of her story rather than the end of it. "You okay, Grandma?" Lucas noticed her pause, his sensitivity unchanged by success. At 25, he still watched for signs of the old pain, protective of the woman who'd saved him from his parents' fate. Eleanor smiled, genuine and warm. Just remembering how far we've come, all of us. Emma linked her arm through Eleanor's, 3 generations moving forward together. The flight to Zurich was peaceful. First-class tickets purchased honestly for travelers who'd earned their seats. Eleanor dozed between her grandchildren, feeling a contentment that had once seemed impossible. She'd built something from nothing twice, first her company, then her true family. Both had required sacrifice, but only one had given her joy. The award ceremony drew hundreds of supporters, fellow warriors in the battle against family financial abuse. Eleanor's speech wove together personal pain and universal truth, acknowledging that betrayal by blood cut deepest, but healed strongest when transformed into purpose. She thanked Emma and Lucas publicly, crediting them with teaching her that family was about choice, not chromosomes. "My son taught me what family wasn't," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. "My grandchildren taught me what it was. Love without conditions, support without manipulation, presence without price tags. They saved me as much as I saved them, proving that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into." The foundation had helped thousands by then, expanding globally with programs in 17 countries. Every dollar that might have funded Marcus's schemes now funded recovery for others. Eleanor had transformed her worst day into countless better days for strangers who became family through shared experience. The money meant nothing compared to the lives changed. This is your last chance. You've witnessed the complete journey from betrayal to triumph, from abandonment to redemption. Subscribe now or carry the weight of knowing you took this story without giving anything back, just like Marcus did. The parallel should disturb you enough to act. After the ceremony, a woman approached Eleanor privately. She was young, maybe 30, with eyes that held familiar pain. "My mother did the same thing. Stole my inheritance, abandoned me when I caught her. I thought I'd never recover. Then I found your foundation, your story. You saved my life." Eleanor held her as she cried, another soul scarred by family betrayal but not broken by it. Emma watched from across the room, seeing her grandmother comfort a stranger with the same tenderness she'd shown 2 abandoned children years ago. This was their legacy, not money or property, but the ability to transform pain into purpose. She caught Lucas's eye, and they shared a moment of wordless gratitude for the woman who'd chosen them when their parents hadn't. The trip home included a stop in Cambodia. Not to visit Marcus's grave, Eleanor felt no obligation to dead betrayal, but to inaugurate a new foundation center in Phnom Penh. The facility would help elderly Cambodians protect themselves from family financial abuse, education born from Eleanor's experience. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Marcus's crime scene had become a place of healing. Lucas performed at the opening, his violin singing songs of sorrow and strength. Emma spoke about justice transcending borders, how family betrayal was universal, but so was recovery. Eleanor cut the ribbon with steady hands, thinking of all the hands that had built this moment. Harrison's legal brilliance, Patricia's financial forensics, Sarah's fresh perspective, even Marcus and Diana, whose betrayal had catalyzed transformation. Back in San Francisco, life settled into new rhythms. Emma had married a fellow prosecutor who understood that family meant choice. Their wedding had been small, perfect, with Eleanor walking Emma down the aisle in place of the father who'd chosen money over presence. Lucas toured internationally, but always returned home, the estate his anchor in a world of concert halls and hotels. Eleanor updated her will one final time, not from fear, but from completion. The foundation was secured for generations, its mission protected by legal structures Marcus could never have imagined breaking.
Emma and Lucas would inherit memories, values, and enough resources to build on the legacy. But the real inheritance was the lesson written in every choice. Love was not obligation, but decision, renewed daily. The estate hosted weekly dinners now, filled with chosen family. Fellow survivors from the foundation, Emma's growing family, Lucas's music friends, the lawyers and accountants who'd become allies and then friends. The table that had once held two, Eleanor and her betrayal, now overflowed with connection. Marcus had stolen money, but given her freedom to build something better. Eleanor sometimes walked to the spot where she'd watched Marcus's car disappear that foggy morning. The driveway looked the same, but everything else had changed. The woman who'd stood there broken had become someone stronger, not despite the betrayal, but because of what she'd built from its ashes. The scar remained, would always remain, but it had become part of her story rather than the end of it. Emma found her there one evening, pregnant with her first child. "What will you tell them about their great-uncle?" she asked, hand resting on her growing belly. Eleanor considered carefully. "The truth when they're old enough. That family can fail us, but we can choose to succeed anyway. That betrayal is a beginning, not an ending. That love isn't about blood, but about showing up, every day, especially when it's hard." They stood together in the gathering dusk, 3 generations, almost 4, bound by choice rather than chance. The airport, the abandonment, the agony. It had all led here, to this moment of quiet triumph. Eleanor had lost a son but gained a family, lost millions but gained purpose, lost trust but gained wisdom. The trade, she realized, had been worth every tear. As they walked back to the house, Emma asked one more question. "Do you forgive him?" Eleanor paused, considering. "I forgive the boy he was. I understand the man he became, but mostly I thank him. His betrayal taught me that real family isn't about what you're given, but what you choose to give. And I choose this, us, every day, forever." The lights of the estate glowed warm in the darkness, welcoming them home. Inside, Lucas played piano, the notes drifting through open windows into the night. The music spoke of journeys completed and others beginning, of scars transformed into strength, of families lost and families found. It was the sound of choosing love over fear, purpose over pain, future over past. Eleanor Blackwood had been abandoned at an airport 10 years ago, but she'd never truly been alone. She'd carried within her the capacity to transform betrayal into blessing, to build family from the ashes of blood. The foundation would continue long after she was gone, helping others make the same transformation. But tonight, she was here, home, surrounded by the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her in return. The story that began with abandonment ended with abundance, not of money, but of meaning, not of blood, but of bond. And in that ending was a new beginning for every person who'd ever been left behind but refused to stay there. The scars remained, would always remain. But scars, Eleanor had learned, were just proof of survival, maps to better destinations, reminders that what breaks us can also build us into something stronger, kinder, and infinitely more beautiful than what we were before.